Hey everyone, we are back. This is part 2 of our pic scraper tutorial. And in this tutorial version, we're going to go ahead and create our basic GUI for our project. So as you can see, I've opened up the form designer here in Code Typhon. And I'm going to go ahead and give this project a name. So I went up and hit save. And as you can see, I've already created a CT_projects folder that I'm going to keep all my projects in. And so I'm going to create another folder here called CT pic scraper. Okay, and that's going to be the folder that we're going to put in our project. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter and save that. And now we're inside our CT pic scraper folder. And as you can see, we have a project file here called project1.ctpr, which is a Code Typhon project file. Normally I would just leave this as project 1. But I'm going to go ahead and just change the name here just for this tutorial. But really, just leaving it project 1 is just fine. Okay, and let's put a hyphen in there just to make it neater looking. Save that. Oh, okay. Looks like it didn't like that hyphen. It says it's an invalid project name. So let's go ahead and retry that. And I'm going to take out that hyphen. And let's give that another shot. That's better. Okay, as you can see, we have unit1.pas as our main source file, and that's fine. We'll just go with unit1. You can optionally name that if you like, but personally I think unit1 is just fine. Let me expand this out a bit. There we go, and I got a bigger form. And let's start out by changing off the caption. By default it's form 1. I'm going to call it CT pic scraper. CT for Code Typhon. You can really name it anything you want. For the sake of the tutorial, I'm just going to call it that. Okay, and we'll save that, and we'll hit our build and launch button here, and it is now building our project, and we should have a form. There we go, a blank window with our caption CT pic scraper up there. So far so good. All right, now let's move along and get some components onto our form. So first of all, I'm going to pop up here under standard tab, and I'm going to add a main menu to our form. So let's go ahead and do that first. I'm going to click the main menu item and click down here in the form. And as you can see, a placeholder has come up. So I'm going to go ahead and add some menu items to the main menu. How we do that is we right click, select menu editor, and then we have this little wizard here. Select add menu item, and we'll get a main menu item up here on top. And if we go over into our properties area, you'll see that it's menu item 1 by default. I'm going to call it file. Okay, and so that's our first main menu item. Underneath that we have a submenu, and underneath file I'm going to create a caption called quit. Okay, now as you can see, underneath file we have quit, and that is a menu item, and I'm going to name this menu item quit. That way it's easier to identify when we add a event to it later, because we want to be able to click on that and then have it close our form. Now back up to the main menu item. Let's add another one, and we'll caption, excuse me, we'll title this edit, and then we'll name it menu item edit. And then underneath that, we'll click the add submenu. And I'm not sure if we'll actually use this, but let's call it preferences. And then we'll name it menu item preferences. Well, actually prefs for short, it's easier. Let's go back here. I'm going to rename this menu item file. I forgot to do that one. Okay, now let's add one more main menu item, and let's call this help. Okay, and then of course we'll name it menu item help, and then we'll give help a submenu here, and we'll title this one about. We're going to create an about box a little bit later. Call it menu item about. I want to do that just kind of to show you how to create another dialog and be able to open it by clicking something such as the help menu item. Okay, let's take a look at it. And there we go, there's our form, and we have our menu, quit, edit, preferences, and about. We can also add little icons to these guys, and I may do that later. However, here's our basic. So we have help, about, click on it, nothing happens on any of these because they don't have events attached to them yet. So we'll get to that as well. Did you see how I just clicked on quit? When I did that, it created a click event called menu item quit and took me into the source editor. That's pretty cool. So what we're going to do is we're going to call form1.close. Okay. And so now what we're doing is we're telling the form that if we click on that quit menu, it's going to close the form. So let's try it out and see if that worked. Okay, let's go to File and Quit, and it closed the form. So that's how easy it is to do a click event. Piece of cake, easy peasy. It's one thing I love about this designer and Lazarus / Code Typhon. So from there, let's stick some more things onto our form. Let's go up here and let's run over to additional and let's put on an image. Now what this is this is our image container. So when we scrape a website for images, when it selects a random image off a website, it's going to load it into this image component. So it's going to actually stream it from online into that image component, which is very cool. You can also load images just from a file off of your computer, of course, too. But in this case, we're going to actually stream that image, download it right into this image component. Now I'm going to put a panel underneath that. So let me click that. And then we'll just stick it down here. And I'll just resize it a little bit here. I'm going to put my button in here. You might think it's kind of overkill to put a button inside a panel, but the reason I'm doing that is twofold. One, I want to kind of show you some centering techniques and so forth when we start anchoring these. And two, we're kind of going by the seat of our pants, but in the future, we might add some more items to that button because I'm going to put a button in this panel. And maybe later on down the line, we might want to stick something else in there like a checkbox or an edit field or something. And if we do that, they're a lot easier to manage if we have them inside a panel. So now I'm adding in a status bar. And I'm putting that on the bottom. The reason I'm putting a status bar in here is because when we load a picture, I wanted to display the URL of the picture inside the status bar. Now the status bar itself doesn't really display text, so we got to add what's called a panel item. And so you do that by right-clicking here and select a panel editor, or open it rather. Then we click Add, and that will add a panel item into our status bar. And this is where text actually goes. And as you can see, it's about 50 pixels wide by default. And I'm just going to use this particular panel item as kind of like a margin, just to push out the text 50 pixels. And then I'm going to add another one, which is going to be the actual one that will contain our text. So I'm going to make this one wider. And I think I'll just maybe make it 800 pixels. So let me just go ahead and type that in. Okay, so this panel 1 is the one where we're actually going to hold our text. And we'll kind of get back to that later. But for now, I just kind of wanted to get that in there. But this will be where our text is going to go, and it'll show up down here. And instead of the text being right at the very edge, we have panel 0 that's actually taking up 50 pixels of space. So that way it won't be hugging the edge, it'll be out a little bit. That'll make more sense later. Okay, now I'm going to get rid of the caption here on this panel so it's not sitting in the middle of the thing there. There we go. And now we have a nice clear panel. And I'm going to go ahead and stick a button in there. There we go. And let's take that button and I'm going to just kind of slide it over, I think. First of all, I'm going to do some anchoring. Let me go into the image anchoring properties and I'm going to center it. First of all, I'm going to make the main form its parent. And as you can see, it's right up against it. If I hit it, then it centers it, moves it on the left-hand side from against the form to centered. So there, excuse me, got a frog in my throat today. Okay, let's launch it just to see how everything's going. Excellent. So there's our button, and it doesn't do anything, of course. And you can see the outline of our panel there. where we made it, because by default the panel is beveled. And as you can see, the panel is staying against the left side because it's really anchored to the left. So when you expand your form, it's staying anchored to the left hand side of the form. I think I kind of like to have that in the center too. So I'm going to go ahead and make our form a sibling. And then let's go ahead and center that. There we go. So now if we open this up, you can see that it's centered. And if we expand the form here, you'll see that it's staying in the center of the form. But watch what happens when I go ahead and widen it out. It's maximized, but now it's literally in the center of the form. So it's not near the bottom anymore, which could be a problem if you want to have your image up there. So we kind of want that to stick to the bottom of the form. So I'm going to go back into our anchoring here. And we want to enable bottom anchoring. And then select our form. Actually, I'm going to select status bar, because the status bar is actually the one that's right underneath it. So that's going to be the sibling. Oh yes, and we'll want to put a little space between it. Okay, now let's take a look. Okay, now if we open it up, oh, look at that. Now it's expanding, but it's sticking to the bottom. But look at that, it's getting wider as we make the form bigger. So we still got a little more work to do. And I'm just kind of doing this so you can understand anchoring a little better. So let's just jump back in here again. And as you can see, it's anchored to the top. So let's turn that off. Close it. And now it should not expand because it's not trying to stick to the top. So you can kind of think of those anchors as kind of like magnets. It'll be attracted to wherever you attach it to. So now it's staying in the center all the time, and it's keeping its size as we maximize the form. So that's kind of the effect we want. So that's good. Now watch what happens here if I enable right anchoring to our form, and then we want to click over here because we want the right side of the panel to anchor to the right side of the form. And as you can see, it goes all the way to the edge, so we want to give it a little margin, and we'll just make that, let's say, 10. Okay, that looks pretty even with the image component there above it. So that's good. All right. Now let's go ahead and open this up. Now that we have it anchored on both sides, what will happen is it should expand with the form. So if we expand the form out, the panel expands with it. That way it's uniform. Yeah, that's pretty nice. So that's how you do that if you want a window or a panel or something to expand along with the form as you increase the form size or maximize it. In this case, I think we just want to keep it centered for now anyway. So I'm going to turn that off. And then that way we can just have centering. But I just wanted to show you that anyway, so you understood how you can expand something. So just going to double check here, make sure everything's okay. We expanded, it's centered, looking good. Okay, now let's go ahead and anchor the image component here. And so let's just anchor this to our panel. And as you can see, now it's hugging the panel with no border spacing. So it's going right to that panel. So let's give it a little space there, a little breathing room. And let's move that up. Let's give it 10. That seems like a good number. And then let's anchor that to the right to the form. And then over here, we don't need to have it centered anymore, so we're going to anchor it to the left side with a 10 margin. There we go. That looks pretty even. Now let's do the top. So we'll anchor the top to the form. And as you can see, it's hugging the main menu item there. So let's give it a little space, and I think maybe 16 will do for now. Let's go ahead and close that. Okay. Now we kind of got our controls laid out where we want it, and just hit save there. Now when you go ahead and launch your form, it does save automatically by default, but I like to hit save anyway. You never know what can happen. Power outage or something. Okay, now let's take our button and let's give it a caption. Let's call it maybe grab a random pic. There we go. And so now you can see the text change on our button, but it's not really full size. So let's hit auto size. And now the button has automatically expanded to take in all the text. And I like using the auto size because when you run this or any app on different computers with different resolutions, sometimes that text isn't always uniform. So the auto size will take care of that. Now let's just anchor this button too. And so we're going to anchor it to our panel. And it put it all the way to the left of the panel. And now it put it all the way to the top of the panel. So now it's right up in the upper left corner. Let's give it some space, move it out about 20 pixels from the left, and maybe 16 from the top. And I think that's good for now. We can always change that later. So yeah, I think that's good. I'm going to go ahead and close that. And one thing I want to point out too, when you anchor something, let me try to move this button. See, when I try to drag it, it doesn't go anywhere. That's because it is anchored in place. So, and the same with the panel, since it's anchored, I can't go and move that panel around anymore. And so when you anchor an item, it's going to stay put. And so if I go ahead and run this again, just going to make sure everything looks good. And it does. And there's our button, grab a random pic. Nice. And there's our help menu, quit, edit. Let's make an about box real quick. So I'm going to go up here on our designer. And I'm going to go ahead and click on help and then select about. And that is going to create another click event. Okay. And so now what we want to do is we want to create another form. So I'm going to go up here to File, New Form. And as you can see, we have another new form. And by default, it's called Unit 2, which is fine. I mean, we could name it and call it About. Typically, I do that. But I think it's not really important whether you name the form or not. But let's go up here to the caption. And we'll just call this About CT Pic Scraper. Okay, so that kind of gives it a nice caption. So now let's just real quick, just put a couple of basic components on here. Let's stick a panel on here again, and just going to size that up a little bit. Actually, I'm going to anchor it, so I don't really have to size it because the anchoring will take care of that anyway, but yeah, you know. Let's jump into our anchors and parent that to Form 2. And let's give it a margin of, 10's a good number, so let's go with that again. And now let's do the same with the left. 10. Then we'll do the same over here. Make that 10. Parent that to the form. Enable it. And then the bottom anchoring will do the same thing. And then click the bottom button here because we want them all to match to where their locations are. Oh yeah, and I need to do that too. That's got to be on the right. Okay, very good. Let me hit the bottom here. Bottom for bottom, right for right, top for top, and left for left. Okay, and we'll give that a margin of 10. So now you can see our panel is just kind of centered to the form very nicely. And let's get rid of that caption in our panel. Okay, let me do that again. Yoink. All right, very good. We'll stick a button in, label in here, and on this label, first of all, let me just center it real quick. Let's go ahead and do the font first, and I want to make this bold, so I'm going to hit bold here, and we went to font and style, and now I'm going to change the color just to show you that you can change font colors. So I am going to go ahead and scroll and find a decent color. And that one's pretty good, active caption. Let's keep going. Maybe I'll go with navy. So let's go with that. Okay, great. That looks good. And we'll go up here and change our caption to, let's see, well, let's call it CT Pick Scraper. There we go. Very good then. And we will center that to our form. That way it's perfectly centered. Nice. Okay. Let's do another one. Let's put a version label underneath that. So when you look at the about box, it'll say Pick Scraper and version. And we're going to center this guy too by pairing it to the form. And for now, this is just going to say version, but let me make that bold as well. So we go to font, style, and bold. We set that to true, so that'll make the text bold. And I think we'll just keep the color at black and call this version. This is kind of a placeholder for now. We're going to make a variable that we'll call to the actual version of our app. And this is called unit2.pas by default. We could actually name that about, but I think, you know, that's fine to just keep it unit2. So now, back to our click event. What we want to do now is we want to be able to open that. So let's go up here, and under our uses area, we want to add our unit2 source file in here. So that way it knows where to find it or what to look for. So now if we go into our click event and we hit unit2 dot, and then you can see form2 has popped up. That's our class that we want to call. So let's hit form2 dot show. There we go. Now if I didn't screw anything up, we should be able to launch this and then click on our menu item about. So let's go up there, hit that, and there it is. Our simple about box, which we'll make a little fancy later, but that's basically how you would open an about box and program that in there. So cool and groovy. That should cover it for this tutorial. In our next one, we'll go ahead and start coding. We'll see you then.